Hello, everyone. The flank is a weird thing. Compared to the combo, which the combo is very easy to understand. Basically, what the team is doing is kind of what the combo is doing for the most part. It is the center of the action and the center, or the backbone of what you're going to be doing. In comparison, the flank is much more nebulous and much more about opportunism. So one thing that I wanted to focus in on for today is what are some ideas of what you can do when you get behind on the flank, with a particular focus on backcaps. So for starters, on 5CP, basically every single map, well, on literally every single map, the last point caps the fastest. And on most of them, the second point caps faster than the midpoint, but both cap. That is the worst way I could have put it. Basically, last is fastest, second is second fastest, mid is the slowest. There is one exception that I can think of with Gully Wash, being that second and mid actually cap at the same rate, oddly enough. But for the most part, that is the case. And that makes things a little interesting as far as getting behind goes, because a single player that is backcapping on either second or last is able to outcap, in some cases, even multiple players that are stacking a point further forward. So just in the basic, construction of these maps, backcaps can be a threat you have to deal with, just off the back of potentially a single person who's behind. But yeah, with backcaps in mind, let's talk where you see them, when to go for them, and stuff like that. So for starters, the most common example, and probably the easiest to understand as well, which is in part maybe why it's so common, is backcaps on last. So a backcap on last is very straightforward because, you just cap the point and then you win. And it's a very fast point to cap. So you only need a small window of time to be on last alone in order to win. And this is usually achieved by a couple means. So primarily is, just a player hiding somewhere that either stayed in last, hiding somewhere during a failed push and the other team forgot about them, or in some cases we're hiding in lobby if there's a hiding spot in lobby or somewhere thereabouts, or there was just a door that didn't get cleared and they found that opportunity to push behind to last. So very easy to understand the primary way that backcaps on last happen, and also the counterplay, again, is very easy because you just clear everything and spot players. If there's 3 players in front and you look up at your match HUD and there's only 3 players alive, well, then they're all accounted for, and you don't really have to clear anything anymore, as long as you just watch the doors in front and no one gets behind. Likewise, if, there is a suspicious absence of vision on players, then you might want to take some extra care to really clear stuff, or just have someone linger kind of in limbo where they could easily go stop a cap on last, right? Very simple. Man, this demo is kind of broken. There's just floating players everywhere. But anyway, the other major case that you see backcaps on last happen is with a spy. And spy is a little harder to see coming, but again, very straightforward. Because the times that you would go for a backcap on spy is really timing dependent on when you have not only the knowledge that the other team's trying to push out, in which case you'd want to be going for that play, but also have the advantage of like that nice spawn timing where you can make it to last in time before the other team pushes and caps second, right? Because you can't backcap last if the other team has control of second. So yeah, as far as playing that spy backcap, it's pretty much just timing dependent. And then for countering it, it's really just a matter of recognizing if those timings exist for the other team. Because, again, when players die, so you have approximate ideas of when they're respawning, so you have approximate ideas of when there might be a spy timing, and you can just leave a guy behind if you're particularly paranoid about it. Now, of course, there are, specifics. Maybe they were playing a spy on last for like a sack type of deal, and then suddenly you're trying to push out, and now this spy is in a good position to backcap. So there are, of course, going to be more specifics and more nuances. But by and large, it is a pretty easy situation to understand as far as backcaps are concerned. Now, I will talk briefly about backcaps on mid and your second. Just because they're very rare and not really the meat of what I wanted to dive in on. So basically, backcapping the midpoint or your second point as the other team's pushing your last are inherently less advantaged backcaps than elsewhere on the map because, of course, your mid is going to cap slower than your second, and likewise, your second is going to cap slower than your last. So you really need the stars to align on the backcap play for it to be particularly successful in that regard, just because you don't have that inherent advantage of like a single scout can kind of outcap maybe a couple people. And then you throw in a little bit of pressure, like slow down the cap a little bit, and suddenly like you're off to the races, right? It's not really like that. And in fact, as long as their scout is able to get on the point at approximately the same time, you just aren't a threat whatsoever because you get outcapped. Same thing applies to backcapping on second. And in fact, you have the added disadvantage. Well, of course, the disadvantage is the same on second as it is on last, but it is more pronounced and more high stakes on last. The fact that you're down a guy, right? Because your player is behind trying to play a backcap. It's much, much easier to cap last than it is to cap second. Like just time-wise. And it's even easier to cap last when they're down a player. And if you're behind, you're, of course, down a player. So yeah, those are pretty uncommon examples. They still can happen. And a more common example as far as like a last hold, backcap-esque sort of play is stopping the cap entirely. If the other team is pushing forward quickly to try and take their Uber and they're leaving a player to cap, then you could theoretically have someone try to stop that cap. And if they can successfully kill that player on point, we are paused. If you can successfully stop that player on point, then yeah, you might be able to just hold last off the fact that they can't cap the point because they never got to. But yeah, those are less common for sure. And it's always going to be inherently risky to try and get players behind against points that cap slower than the ones in front because, the other team can just keep pushing forward with that number advantage that you're giving them. So now I want to talk about the textbook backcap, which I'm saying is not going to be the one on last, but actually on 2. This is backcaps at their most nuanced and their most freeform, because there can be a lot of outcomes here. So for starters, you have all the things that you want in the backcap, right? You cap faster than mid, so you have an inherent advantage to outcap the other team unless they stack. Now, of course, if they do stack, then they run the risk of your team delaying the cap long enough for the backcap to go through, right? And this can be done with just a soldier. Sometimes even a demo will just bomb the point just to delay for that little bit, because the demo death might be worth getting that backcap off if that means that they can then run off to last and just win the round, right? So that can be a case. Likewise, if the other team, or excuse me, your team, the team that's backcapping has Uber as well, then very intuitively you can play an exchange, right? Just to delay, and then the backcap goes through. And the other team is not obliged to stack the point. They might send their flank back to go 1v2 the guy behind. If there's multiple players behind, they might bring their entire combo behind to try and kill those players. So any number of these outcomes could be happening. And I kind of want to look at them and look at how you would approach this as far as a backcap goes for a flank member. So in short, I think that one of the most valuable things you can do while you're behind as a member of the flank is live, right? And Of course, there's something to be said for just, forcing an enemy medic with a scout that wraps behind or whatever, and just, getting yourself advantage. Like, that's totally worth. And that is fine. But in the case of like a backcap, if, for example, the other team sends their flank back to go fight you, then there isn't really much point to taking that fight, is there? Even if they only send one guy behind, unless you're really confident that you're going to win it, a lot of the time that's going to be kind of a coin flip fight that you don't really have to take necessarily. I guess if it's a 1v1, then there is merit to taking it. But a 1v2, by all means, you should be going further behind and trying to live, right? Because what you're doing is not only stalling the other team, making it so that their flank is now completely open for your roamer because, both their flank are behind trying to find you. But on top of that, you're also making the overall numbers in your favor because, you are effectively down a player because your guy is behind, just trying to waste time. And the other team is down too because they're trying to chase you. And as long as you lead them on a wild goose chase, this can go on. And eventually, like, your disadvantage or whatever the other team's pushing off of is null and void. Like, you may have built Uber in time. Any number of things can happen just because you are still alive, still behind. And this applies to backcaps as well. Like, if you are getting that value, getting that space, and man, I'm trying to let's move to an example here. So let's imagine it is a flank shove. You and your roamer, you as the flank scout and your roamer both shove the flank and try and backcap. And let's say you stick the cap, you get the cap, but the other team rotated their combo back and they kill you. In this case, it is still a net positive for your team ultimately, because of course you slowed the other team. In all likelihood, your team is either getting Uber or have built much better that, the next point down you're getting Uber. So you're expecting to lose like one fewer point than you would have otherwise, which is good. But on the flip side, you are giving them those 2 picks, and they are in all likelihood going to be able to either, push the point that they were already pushing, or at least get really good pressure into it off the fact that you're down 2. You might be forced to play an exchange. It's just going to be an uncomfortable situation for you, just because your flank died, right? But if we compare that exact situation to a situation in which the flank does not get the cap and instead gets the cap time and then continues going back to just live, then in a case like that, suddenly the combo who went back for you are now tasked with the difficult decision of like, what do we do? Because if they leave, then suddenly like they're leaving their flank to watch that and potentially just play like kind of a coin flippy fight, for maybe even what's the word I'm looking for? For maybe even the result of the round. Because if they lose that fight and 2 gets caps, then, what's stopping whoever caps from winning the last and capping that and winning the round, right? It's just a very uncomfortable position to be in with players behind like that. And that's why living and just being a thorn in their side is such a big deal. Now, of course, there are more specifics that, as someone who doesn't play any flank roles and doesn't really have that kind of specific experience, can't speak too much about, as far as like if you're backcapping 2, then a lot of the time your soldier might want to be trying to maybe play for a bomb as they're retreating and catch them in the choke when they're not expecting it, stuff like that. Like there are specifics that are being missed, but point being, there can be a lot of value found in just continuing to live and continuing to be a thorn in not even their side, they're behind, I suppose. But yeah, and backcapping, of course, is not all you have to do. Just living behind with the threat of potentially collapsing. Like, soldiers behind are such a big problem for a team, because if we imagine, there's a backcap here that we actually just comfortably outcap. That was a demo. That is so strange. Yeah, if we can imagine a case where it is a flip-flop situation. Or, yeah, like a flip-flop kind of situation where one team has ad and is trying to push. If a soldier manages to get behind during that, that's a big problem for the other team. Because not only do they, are they running the risk of a soldier just bombing from behind and destroying them, but they also run the much greater risk of that soldier continuing to live behind while the team that now has ad gets to push in and potentially do like a pinch maneuver. Because that soldier just needs to sit back, stay healthy, and then like listen or ask where the other team's combo is leaving, and then suddenly there's just a door for them to blow everyone up with this giant rocket launcher, right? So like a behind play like that in a kind of transitional flip-floppy Uber situation is just such a huge asset to have. So we've established that going behind is a really important way to press advantages as the flank, right? And create opportunities for your team. But when do you go behind? Well, usually going behind is achieved through like a flank shove or something. And the good times to flank shove would be, well, of course, I should say you can just go behind because it's not being watched as well. And off of timings and things like that, which might actually be your primary way. Again, the details, not so good at. I'm more of a macro flank understander just because I understand what my flank is doing in the macro sense just from the combo, right? Because that's where my experience comes from. But, of course, you can just find your way behind off of timing or something not being watched, etc. And you can muscle your way behind through a flank shove. And a good time to go for a flank shove would be when the other team is down a player, like a soldier or a scout. Because in those cases, well, you wouldn't be flank shoving if they're down a demo or a medic because they're unlikely to be pushing if they're down a demo or a medic. And if they are, then I suppose you could be shoving if they're down demo. Yeah, that should be something that would be very exploitable if they're trying to do that down those very important classes. But down a soldier and a scout, you can absolutely still push. However, you're expecting their flank to be only one person, right? Because if they're down a scout, then whatever scout's alive is going to want to be playing with the beam and playing like pocket scout. Likewise, if they're down a soldier, then whatever soldier's alive is going to want to be making space for the combo and playing with the combo. So you're expecting there to only really be one player on the flank. And as a result, if your flank of two players, your roamer and your flank scout, shove it, then they might be able to rush down this player in a 2v1 and get a kill. And at the very least, you might be able to like slow the other team a little bit. And that's going to be something I'll talk about in a little bit here. But yeah, with a pick, something like that is a good thing. Now, something to note as well is in all these examples of flank shoves I've offered, these are all in pretty much disadvantageous situations, right? Where the other team has Uber ad. Usually, I would advise against risking your life a lot if you're down players. Because, of course, if the other team's trying to do things off of player ad, then you making a risk that might, get you killed or something is potentially going to worsen the problem. There's, again, opportunism, and there might be the case where you can get away with it. But by and large, these are situations in which people are alive, but it's Uber disad. So with that in mind, in the case of Uber disad, all you really want is, well, you of course want the other team. You want ad. You want ad or you want evens. Those are both better than disad, if you believe it or not. But with the exception of like sacking to force their med or some crazy trap kill or something like that, which of course you'd all like to have, still the primary tool you have in order to even things out is just delaying. So there are multiple ways that this can happen. You can just play really strong spam so that they are kind of slow getting through the choke point. They need to heal a bunch, and that's a great way to delay. And a flank shove as well. Like if the player on the flank doesn't even die but is just calling like, hey, they're shoving this, that there are times where that might bring their combo back a bit, just slow them a little bit. And as long as you guys are living, then that's just great. You've bought your team more time to build Uber and potentially even things out. You're going to have to give up less ground than you would otherwise, and things are good. So, yeah, flank shove's a great option there. And again, backcaps, like think of them not so much as I'm trying to win the game here by capping this point and then going and capping last, although that might happen sometimes if it goes well. Think of it more as I'm trying to bring their combo back, and I am trying to just buy my team time, right? And when it does go well, then you'll be able to get space and even press disadvantages, turn those into advantages. Because again, like there are going to be cases where your team might be able to take a good fight on mid when the other team pushes in, even though the other team has Uber, for instance. If they're too busy like Ubering in and trying to kill you all, then they're just going to lose the game because the backcap's going to go off. But you can apply just enough pressure so they're not comfortable enough to outstack, all sorts of things like that. And you can see how it's like just a very fluid and dynamic situation that you can play in different ways. What else? Talked flank shoves. Yeah, I mentioned already that these are largely disadvantageous situations that you're going for these plays. And again, these are largely disadvantageous situations in which you have some map control at least. Like, you aren't really shoving behind on last. You know, those situations in which it's very important to have all your players alive, because again, when you are behind, you are not able to prevent the other team from just walking forward. So that's something you have to be very careful of. You see how that sticky just like kind of flew in? That confused me a lot when I saw that. Yeah, you are effectively down a player. So there will be cases where, you know, maybe instead of being like, oh, this guy behind is a huge problem, we need to like worry about that, it's more so, hey, there are only like 4 up in front, let's just go now, or something to that effect, right? So you do have to be careful with it. You don't want to be feeding, you don't want to be you know, putting your team in a disadvantageous position by, you know, being unable to fight and all the things associated with that. But yeah, going behind is a really useful play on the flank. Sometimes it just gives you a free med force because you're able to just get in close unspotted. Other times it's going to be able to buy your team a ton of time with disad, and sometimes even things out or win you points with really well applied pressure in a backcap. But it all does come from playing intelligently, playing around not only the literal coded objective of the game, but the kind of understood objective of the meta game, right? So yeah, just live behind on your backcaps. Just waste as much time as you can when it's disad on the flank, because that's gonna help your team. And overall, you know, flank is cool. Getting behind is really nice. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully it wasn't too general. I got some specific info in there, but again, the flank is not really my forte. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something, and goodbye.